Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The air on Solstice III smelled of burning metal and ionized blood. Cal Varric wiped grime from his visor, his exosuit's HUD flashing red. Ammo depleted, shields at 12%. Around him, the human colony's last barricade crumbled under the Vorthax assault. Their insectoid warriors carved through steel like paper, chittering in their guttural tongue. Kale had seen this before. The Vorthax didn't take prisoners. They scorched worlds, leaving only glass and bones. Sira, a Vorthax battlemaster, watched from the ridge. Her obsidian carapace gleamed under the planet's twin suns. To her, humans were weak, soft-skinned, slow, their defiance pitiable. But then she saw him. Kale fought differently. When his rifle jammed, he swung it like a club, cracking a Vorthax warrior's thorax. When his knife shattered, he used a broken pipe. He fought not like a soldier, but like a man who'd already buried too many. Sira's mandibles twitched. This human wasn't just surviving, he was refusing to lose. As the last of Kale's squad fell, Sira descended. Her warriors hesitated. She raised a claw, halting them. Kale staggered to his feet, gripping a shard of shrapnel. "Finish it," he rasped. Sira tilted her head. "Why do you resist? Your death is inevitable." Kale spat blood. "Because someone's gotta remember this place was worth dying for." Something in his voice, raw, unbroken, made Sira's antennae flare. For the first time, she questioned the Vorthax creed. All lesser life must burn. She turned to her warriors. "Leave him." As the Vorthax retreated, Kale collapsed. The last thing he saw was Sira's faceted eyes studying him, not with contempt, but curiosity. The dust settled over the ruins of Solstice II, the twin suns painting the battlefield in hues of amber and rust. Cal Varric woke to the hum of alien machinery, his body aching, his mind fogged by pain. He expected the cold grip of a Vorthax execution chamber, or worse, the dissection table. Instead, he found himself in a dimly lit cavern, his wounds crudely bandaged with a strange, fibrous material that pulsed faintly blue. Sira stood at the entrance, her silhouette sharp against the fading light. She didn't speak at first, merely watched him with those unreadable, faceted eyes. Kale forced himself up, ignoring the protest of his ribs. "You should be dead," she said finally, her voice layered with the clicks and hisses of the Vorthax tongue. "Yeah," Kale rasped. "I get that a lot." Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. He had no reason to trust her. Every instinct screamed that this was a trick, a prelude to torture. But if she wanted him dead, she wouldn't have dragged him here. "Why?" he asked. Sira flexed her claws, the sharp edges catching the light. "You fight differently than the others. Not for orders. Not for hatred. You fight as if the act itself is defiance." Kale let out a dry laugh. "That's what happens when you've got nothing left to lose." She tilted her head, antennae twitching. "Your people are losing this war. Your colonies fall. Your fleets scatter. Yet you stand. Why?" He met her gaze. "Same reason you didn't kill me." Curiosity. A flicker of something. Amusement. Irritation. Passed over her chitinous face. "You are reckless. And you're wasting time talking instead of finishing the job." Sira stepped closer, her movements precise, predatory. "Perhaps I am." Kale didn't flinch. If this was it, he'd go out staring her down. But she didn't strike. Instead, she reached into a pouch at her side and tossed him a small crystalline device. He caught it on instinct. "A translator," she said, "so we do not waste more time." Kale turned the device over in his hands. "You planning to interrogate me? I am planning to understand." He activated the translator, the tiny machine adhering to his temple with a brief sting. The clicks and growls of her speech resolved into words. "You spared me," he said. Your people don't do that. And yours do. No, but I'm not the one breaking protocol. Syrah exhaled, a sound like grinding stone. The Vorthax do not question. We conquer. We cleanse. But you make me question. Kale studied her. Up close, he could see the fine scars along her carapace, the faint discoloration where old wounds had healed. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a survivor, same as him. "You're not here on orders, are you?" he asked. She didn't answer. He smirked. "Guess I'm not the only one with nothing left to lose." For the first time, something like frustration crossed her features. "You presume too much, human. Call me Kale." She hesitated. Then, grudgingly, "Syrah." A name. That meant something. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, a Vorthax patrol droned past, their searchlights cutting through the gloom. Syrah's stance shifted, ready to fight or flee. Kale stood, testing his weight. "So what now? You keep me hidden until they stop looking." Syrah's eyes gleamed. "No. Now you tell me why your kind refuses to die." He grinned, blood still drying on his lips. "That's a long story." She bared her fangs, not a threat, but something eerily close to a smile. "We have time." And for the first time in years, Kale felt something other than despair. Something like hope. The cavern walls hummed with the distant echoes of war. Kale sat with his back against the cold stone, the translator still clinging to his temple like a second skin. Syrah paced, her claws scraping faintly against the rock. She had been silent for a long time, ever since he told her about Earth's fall, the first colony to burn under the Vorthax assault. "You say your leaders knew," she said at last, her voice low, "that they sent your people to die anyway." Kale flexed his injured hand, wincing as the makeshift bandage pulled tight. "Not just mine. Yours too." Syrah stopped mid-step. "Explain." He met her gaze. "Think about it. The Vorthax Empire expands. But for what? More dead worlds? More corpses? Who benefits?" Her mandibles twitched. "The High Claw commands. We obey." "Yeah. And how's that working out for you?" Kale gestured to the cavern, to the distant sounds of patrols hunting them both. "You spared me. That makes you a traitor now, doesn't it?" Syrah's claws flexed, but she didn't deny it. Kale pushed himself up, ignoring the protest of his ribs. "Your leaders send you to die. Mine send us to die. Only difference is, I'm done pretending it's for some greater good." A tremor passed through Syrah's carapace. Cal recognized it. The moment a soldier realizes they've been lied to. He'd felt it himself years ago, when he'd found the classified reports about Solstice II's strategic unimportance. Syrah turned abruptly and retrieved a small holoprojector from her belt. With a flick of her claw, an image shimmered to life. A Vorthax world, lush and green, now a smoldering ruin. "This was Kosvar," she said. "My birth clutches home." The High Claw said humans glassed it from orbit. Cal's stomach twisted. "We didn't." "I know." She shut off the image. The wreckage patterns were from Vorthax pulse bombs. Silence hung between them, thick with the weight of betrayal. Kale exhaled sharply. "So what now? We just sit here until they find us." Syrah's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "No, we find the truth. And then we make them pay." Outside, the distant hum of engines grew louder. A patrol. Syrah moved to the cavern's entrance, her body tense. Kale limped to her side, picking up a jagged piece of shrapnel, his only weapon. Syrah glanced at him. "You can barely stand." He grinned, blood still crusted on his lips. "Yeah, but I'm great at falling down." For a heartbeat, something like respect flickered in her gaze. Then she pointed to a narrow crevice in the rock. "There, it leads to the old mining tunnels. We go deeper." Kale didn't argue. Together, they slipped into the darkness. Two traitors with nothing left but the truth. and each other. The mining tunnel swallowed them whole, the air thick with the scent of damp metal and something older, something that smelled like rust and forgotten bones. Cale kept one hand against the wall to steady himself, his fingers tracing grooves left by ancient machinery. Every few steps, his leg threatened to buckle, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Sira moved like a shadow ahead of him, her chitinous form nearly silent against the stone. She paused at intersections, antennae twitching as she listened for patrols. The Vorthax were still searching, their angry chitters echoing through the tunnels like a swarm of disturbed insects. "You're slowing us down," Sira said, her voice clipped. Cale wiped sweat from his brow. "Yeah, well, next time I'll try getting stabbed somewhere less inconvenient." She didn't laugh, but her claws flexed in what might have been amusement. Then she stopped abruptly, pressing a claw to his chest to halt him. Up ahead, faint light spilled from a side passage. Voices, human voices. Cale tensed. Survivors, or a trap? Sira tilted her head, listening. They speak of a resistance, or their bait. She gave him a look. "You trust no one." Funny, coming from you. Before she could retort, a figure stepped into view. A woman in scavenged armor, her face streaked with grime and defiance. She held a jury-rigged plasma cutter like she knew how to use it. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, her eyes flicking between Cale and Sira with equal suspicion. Cale raised his hands, still gripping the shrapnel. "Captain Cale Varick, 7th Colonial Defense, or what's left of it." The woman's grip on the cutter didn't waver. "And the bug?" Sira bristled, but said nothing. Cale exhaled. "She's with me." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You're either the bravest man alive or the dumbest. Been hearing that a lot lately." A beat. Then the woman lowered her weapon slightly. "Name's Rin. If you're not here to kill us, follow me. And keep your pet bug quiet." Sira's claws twitched, but she followed without protest. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber, lit by flickering glow strips. Dozens of humans, colonists, soldiers, even a few children, huddled together, their faces hollow with exhaustion. A murmur spread through the crowd as they spotted Sira, fear and anger flashing in their eyes. Rin raised a hand. "He says she's friendly." "For now." A man with a cybernetic arm stepped forward, his gaze locked on Sira. "They don't do friendly." Cale limped to the center of the room, every eye on him. "She spared my life. She's risking hers to be here. That's more than our own commanders ever did." The room buzzed with uneasy murmurs. Sira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "Your leaders lied to you. So did mine. This war serves no one but those who sent us to die." Silence. Then from the back, a child's voice. "Is it over?" Cale looked at Sira, then at the faces around him. Human, and for the first time, not entirely hostile. "No," he said, "but it's about to change." The air in the cavern was thick with tension, the kind that clung to skin like static before a storm. Cale stood at the makeshift planning table, a slab of broken hull plating balanced on crates, staring at the crude map etched into its surface. The resistance had grown in the days since they'd arrived, swelling with defectors from both sides. Humans and Vorthax, side by side, united by betrayal. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Sira stood across from him, her claws resting on the edge of the table. The glow strips overhead cast jagged shadows across her carapace, making her look more like a statue than something living. "The relay station is here," she said, tapping a point on the map. "If we disable it, the High Claw's orders won't reach the fleet. They'll be blind." Rin crossed her arms. "And how do we get there? It's crawling with loyalists." Cale studied the map. "We don't. We let them come to us." Sira's antennae twitched. "Explain." He grabbed a piece of scrap metal and placed it near the relay station. "We leak false intel. Make them think this is a human stronghold. When they send forces to wipe us out, We hit the station while it's understaffed. The room buzzed with murmurs. A Vorthax defector, a younger warrior named Vex, clicked his mandibles in approval. It is acceptable. Rin smirked. High praise. Kale ignored the banter, his focus on Syrah. It's risky. If they don't take the bait, then we die, she finished. But we die fighting. There was no fear in her voice, just certainty. Kale nodded. Then let's move. The trap was set. False transmissions broadcasted from the ruins, chatter about weapons stockpiles and human generals. The Vorthax bit hard. By dusk, dropships darkened the sky, disgorging waves of warriors into the decoy zone. Kale watched from a ridge as the Loyalists advanced, their black carapaces blending into the twilight. He keyed his comm. Now, the resistance struck. Explosions lit the relay station's perimeter as sabotage teams blew the outer defenses. Kale led the charge through the chaos, his stolen pulse rifle spitting fire. Beside him, Syrah carved through enemies with lethal precision, her claws slick with ichor. They fought their way to the control hub, where a single Vorthax tech cowered over the console. Syrah grabbed him by the throat. Override the encryption. The tech trembled. The high claw will flay me. Syrah tightened her grip. I will do worse. The tech complied. Screens flickered as the relay died, cutting the fleet off from command. Somewhere in the void, ships would be drifting without orders, their purpose suddenly unclear. Kale exhaled. It's done. Then the wall exploded. Shrapnel tore through the room. Kale hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. Through the smoke, a massive figure loomed, a Vorthax elite, his carapace adorned with the sigils of the High Claw's personal guard. You, the elite snarled, focusing on Syrah. Traitor. She lunged. Their clash was brutal, a whirlwind of claws and fury. Kale tried to stand, but his leg gave out. Rin hauled him up, her face streaked with blood. We have to go. He shook his head. Not without her. Syrah was losing. The elite overpowered her, pinning her to the ground. His claw rose for the killing strike. Kale shot him in the face. The elite staggered. Syrah drove her claws through his throat. Silence. Then the station's alarms wailed, a self-destruct sequence. Rin cursed. Out. Now. They ran. The corridors shook around them, debris raining from the ceiling. Kale limped, Syrah half carrying him. Ahead, the exit beckoned, a sliver of light in the chaos. They burst into the open air just as the station blew. The shockwave threw them to the dirt. Kale rolled onto his back, gasping. Above, the sky was alight with fire. The Loyalist ships, confused and leaderless, turning on each other. Syrah sat up, her carapace cracked in places. It is over. Kale laughed, though it hurt. No, it's just starting. She looked at him, then at the humans and Vorthax picking themselves up from the dust. For the first time, something like hope flickered in her eyes. On the horizon, the twin suns of Solstice II rose, their light washing over the broken world. And for the first time, in a long time, it felt like dawn.